Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Amateur Experts Podcast. I'm your host, Landon Oliver, here with my co host, Andrew Scott.
What's poppin', baby?
What's going on, man?
Not much, man. Ready to talk some more football. It seems like we can't get away from it. We
Yeah,
just this morning we're like, man, we're definitely gonna do a show tonight, but I don't know what we're gonna talk about.
I
But
know.
like 30 minutes later,
Yeah, that's
JJ
what's
Watt,
funny. It's just like, man, like it's kind of been a slow week.
praise.
And then, like, I was sitting in the checkout line of Kroger, and you're like, well, we got something to talk about now. I was like, all right. Um,
Yeah,
so, man, let's just hop into it. If you didn't see the news, we are breaking it here to you. Uh,
you're
I'm-
late. If we're your source, you're late. But
yeah, but hey, it is what it is. So so JJ Watt announced on his Twitter he will be signing with the Arizona Cardinals. I believe it was a 2-year, $32 million deal with $23 million guaranteed. So pretty big deal there. I mean, go ahead and take this because I know we say it all the time, and I know you said it constantly. You're just like, it's the fucking NFC West, man. So, as our resident NFC West
man,
guy, I'll let you
yeah,
go ahead and shoot from the hip.
that's one of many talking points for the NFC West, however you want to relate to them. The tough just gets tougher, which as a Rams fan is extremely annoying. But something that I read I thought was interesting, whenever the news first broke, we were like, wow, after all these years of losing and coming up short, you're still picking the money over winning. Like, we presumed that there were options that were better in terms of the talent. And I don't know how true it was, but I read something from a guy named John Badaro, I think was his name, something along those lines. I hope I didn't butcher it, but I doubt he hears it, so it doesn't really matter. But he was a sports radio host for a Arizona-based show out of Phoenix, and he said that he reported that the deal that J. Watt signed was not the most money he offered, and he was offered, and that the Browns and the Colts each offered more money, and that Tennessee's offer was very similar. Now, again, I mean that who
Well,
knows
let me say
how.
this. Let me say this real quick though. So anytime an Arizona guy starts breaking Colts news, I get a little like, well, iffy. He says he has good sources, but all the Colts beat writers that I know have sources within the organization, especially those that are close to Chris Ballard, have all came out and refuted that report, saying the Colts did check in, but they never actually made an offer to begin with because whenever they heard kind of what it was going for, they just immediately backed out. Like, they checked in on the player, like, anybody's going to have interest, in a guy like that, due to
Right.
his past acumen, not necessarily the last couple seasons, but based on, the position of need for the Colts and all that. So of course they checked in, but I heard from very reputable sources that I know have sources in the Colts organization that they never even made an offer to him. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, I'm not trusting an Arizona guy breaking Colts news. But I mean, you never know. So yeah, everything I've heard that it basically came down to the Bills and the Cardinals were kind of the two teams that were jockeying for his services. Um, Obviously Arizona won, so we'll kind of see how this plays out. I know lining him up next to Chandler Jones is kind of a big thing, but Chandler Jones hasn't necessarily been the model of health. JJ Watt hasn't necessarily been the model of health. And I know we texted each other earlier and I said, Arizona gets about 7 more players on defense and they could actually be pretty good. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
they've got, like you said, Chandler Jones and JJ Watt. That's not the youngest pass rushing duo in the league by any means, or the healthiest. It is a high upside duo if they are able to put it together and stay healthy. They're 1 and 2 in terms of the most sacks in the league since 2012.
that's
And
a
they
long
do
time ago
have
though. I
Chandler,
mean,
like we already talked about Chandler Jones. Yeah, that is a long time ago, and a lot of those sacks obviously
to
were
see
closer to
people,
2012 than they
that's
were to 2020.
yeah.
Um,
And that's what I think's
but
funny
yeah, they do
is I've
still have
been
nice pieces though. They got Buda Baker, they've got Isaiah Simmons, coming into year two. So hopefully he improves. I mean, he didn't play much at the beginning of the year. He really didn't start getting kind of going last year. So I mean, they still have some pieces. The secondary is going to have to use some work for sure, and they're going to have to get some depth. But I mean, they're definitely a better team today than they were yesterday, though.
Yeah, yeah. It's I mean, that's a loaded division too. And of course, we still don't know what's going to happen with Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
If I'm a betting man, which I usually am, I mean, I don't think he's leaving Seattle, but I mean, you never truly know. And obviously, the Rams are the team to beat in that division as of right now, to me, especially with the Stafford trade. And on top of that, the 49ers, if they do end up getting a quarterback, maybe they move up for a guy like Trey Lance in the draft. Maybe they do end up getting that piece. I know there was a report that they contacted Carolina about Teddy Bridgewater as well. So I mean, we'll kind of see what happens with their quarterback scenario. But even then, a healthy
I'd be all
San
right
Fran,
with that.
yeah, I mean, like a healthy San Francisco team, even with Jimmy Garoppolo, we saw made the Super Bowl just a couple years back. So I mean, that's always going to be if they can clean up their secondary. I know they got a lot of secondary pieces there.
Yeah, I mean that 49ers team that made the Super Bowl is a lot different. Even like with Jimmy G back, if he is healthy, the rest of that roster isn't the same either. Um, they have a lot of holes that they didn't have. One of them being the secondary that you just alluded to, but that's not nearly the same team that they were at the Super Bowl either. At least from what I'm remembering. So I mean, I think, man, like you said, I think the Rams are the favorites in the NFC West still. Obviously, being a Rams fan, I'm going to lean that way. But I think the Cardinals have the chance. Really, they have the chance to finish anywhere from 1 to 4. But I think they have a realistic chance to where they could finish anywhere from second in the division and be a wild card team, or they could still be the worst team in the division. There's just the division is so good, like you already alluded to, and every roster has questions, especially at this point, whenever the free agency hasn't happened and the draft hasn't happened yet. Um, but I mean, it wouldn't shock me to see them finish at literally any spot in the division, which is going to be fun to watch as it actually develops during the season. But um, I think they got a pretty good shot at being a wild card team. I mean, granted there was an extra wild card team last year. I don't know if there will be this year again, but they just missed being a wild card team last year. So I think that they've got a decent shot at doing that if they're able to put it together. And I don't really know what to make of Cliff Kingsbury yet. I like the pieces they have on offense. Obviously, they could use some improvement on the offensive line. Um, but I think this year will tell us a lot about Cliff and things like that, because year one seemed optimistic. Year two, this past year was kind of like, eh,
They're fun to
it,
watch.
right. So I think this year is going to answer a lot of questions for them. Um, so I mean, it'll be interesting. I mean, the Rams are losing at least one piece in their secondary, which was the best in the NFL last year. Like, there's no way they're keeping both Troy Hill and John Johnson. I don't think. Um, so that's going to be big. Leonard Floyd's leaving in free agency, most likely after having the best year in his career as a pass rusher and against the run as well. But that part doesn't really concern me as much for the Rams, because I'm sure they'll just bring somebody else in who will also have the best year of his career playing next to Donald. And so that hole doesn't concern me as much as the ones in the secondary do. And then the fact, just the front office and the coaching staff turnover the Rams are dealing with, um, is going to be a concern as well. I mean, McVay and Snead have done a good job together filling those voids in the past, because this isn't the first time they've had coaching turnover since McVay's come along, obviously. So, there's a lot of questions with that. You already touched on the questions with the 49ers with they're basically losing their entire secondary. And even with the healthy Jimmy G, I still don't think he's it. Like, I don't think you're winning a Super Bowl with that guy. I don't think their roster is as good as it was. So, the year they made the Super Bowl. So I can't just pencil them in as a playoff team with them being healthy. A lot of it obviously is going to depend on free agency and
Right.
the draft, what they're able to do. And then the Seahawks, I mean, Carlos Dunlap was a huge part of what they were, of their defense being better the second half of the season. And he could end up being a cap casualty. I mean, I think they say like 10 million or something like that if they cut him. And the offensive line, which was already the nicest thing you could say about them is that they're average. I thought that they were below average this year. They have several players going to free agency, and then you've got the Russell Wilson thing you already touched on as well. So I mean, there's still a lot of question marks with every team in the NFC West. So I mean, it's going to be a really interesting couple months to see what teams do to try to be the favorite, because it seems like every team in this division is in win now mode. So
Yeah. I just
it's,
don't
it's it's insane.
I just don't think, like, at this point, like, JJ Watt, he's 31. He's had a couple down years, and, like, I get it was in Houston, and you can say what you will about their defense and all that, but I mean, uh, I don't really think that he moves the needle that much for that team because on top of, we still don't know if Kingsbury is even a good coach. I mean, there's so much there. I'm not the biggest Kyler Murray fan myself. Like I just don't see it with him. I mean, like, he's exciting and stuff like that,
Hmm.
but I don't know if they can win with him throwing the ball. Obviously, their O line's got question marks. The receiver room is, I'd say, definitely one of the top 10 in the league. They've got a great receiver room, but their tight end room is really bare. The running back room is really bare, especially with some of those guys hitting free agency. So they've got work to do. Tight end, offensive line, uh, running back, defensive backfield, linebacker, um, defensive tackle, even. You know, it's and they've got some young pieces there that you can say, you're hoping they develop, but that's not a given either. So
Hmm.
I just don't see the Cardinals, coming in and JJ Watt being that missing piece.
Oh
I, just-
yeah, no.
I just I think it's funny that JJ Watt's biggest thing that he said, while he wanted to get out of, which I mean, the Texans definitely are, as of right now, the biggest dumpster fire in the league. So I can
Hmm.
understand wanting to go, but they cut him to give him the opportunity to chase a potential championship. And I just don't know why you would choose Arizona because I don't think that team's competing for a Super Bowl. I think if all those players end up, gelling and fitting and all that with all the needs that teams still have and all the question marks, say Murray does end up having a great season and Kingsbury is some offensive wizard that just hasn't happened the last couple years. Um, they're still at least a year or two away from even competing, even if everything goes right, because of how many needs they have on that team. So,
Right.
especially because, like I said, I think you had your headphone off and all that, but I said there was a report that came out that it was basically down to Buffalo and Arizona as the two final teams, and at that point, if you're looking for a championship ready roster, how do you not go to Buffalo in that
Yeah,
scenario? I
Buffalo's
mean,
definitely closer than
yeah, I mean, it's
Arizona for
just
sure.
so I mean, like, you can say, and this just further proves, and I mean, it is what it is in the NFL. I mean, not everybody's going to be Tom Brady. Not everybody's going to take less money, to surround, themselves with better talent and try to win, multiple Super Bowls or even one Super Bowl in his case. But it just goes to show you that money talks. Money is king. And you can have these guys, they can come out and say, like, I want to go to a roster and compete. I want to go to a championship ready team. At the end of the day, whenever you're sitting in that front office, talking to those GMs, and they show you a check, it's got a bunch of zeros at the end of it. I mean, that's hard to pass up, man. And I get it. Like, I mean, you got to get the bag while you can. The average NFL player's career lasts less than 4 years.
Hmm.
So you want to maximize how much money you can get because I mean, JJ Watt, as great as a player as he is, I mean, he's 31. Like, this could very well be his last big chance to get a contract. And
Right.
if he doesn't take that, who knows how much money he's leaving on the table, there. And I get it, but the thing that just it never adds up to me is like these guys come out and they say that they're just like, I want to go to I'm going to take less to compete for a championship at this point in my career. and then like they always do the opposite. It just always makes me crack up. I mean,
Yeah. And I
like I
mean,
said, I'm not admonishing that. Like I said, I get it. I respect it. There's nothing wrong with it. But I mean, just no, come on, man. Like
yeah, yeah. No, I mean, it shows how much we truly don't know either. Because like we all thought that we knew it was either going to be like the Bills or the Packers or the Steelers or something like we all knew that it was just a foregone
well,
conclusion. It
even with the
had to be one of those
Steelers,
teams.
I was like, I don't think the Steelers are
Well,
competing.
yeah, no, like they weren't a Super Bowl team, but you knew that it had to be a likely destination with the brothers being there and and all that stuff, that they should have at least had a shot. But one name that I never heard brought up before today was the Arizona Cardinals. And if it did get
Yeah,
brought up, I could have just missed it. But that was, there was a bunch of names being thrown around out there, and that wasn't one of them. So, um, yeah, I don't. I mean, I agree with you basically. I mean, I do agree that if you have a chance to get paid as a player, you should do so. If you have a chance to control, what happens with your career, like these guys only get one shot to have a career as a player in the NFL. Owners get to fuck up teams as long as they want, as long as they're, the owner of the team, they get to do what they want with it. But
or I
player,
mean, they're kids. I mean that usually stays in the family because we see what's going on with Houston right now. I mean, McNair gave
yeah,
it to his son, and
yeah. So I mean, yeah, yeah. So I don't blame JJ, but I was definitely expecting more of a ring chasing move, and I thought that there were clear options out there for that, like you had already mentioned. Like, I was trying to kind of talk up the Cardinals' chances, but all the talking I was doing of the Cardinals might be this is, hey, they might make the playoffs. Not hey, they might
right.
contend for a Super Bowl. Like you were saying, JJ Watt, as great as he is, he's not a signing that makes them go, okay, well now they're a Super Bowl contender like that. It doesn't do that. Whereas Green Bay, Buffalo, you're a lot closer. Whenever it comes to those
Or
situations.
even
So
Cleveland. I mean, those are the two names that I heard more than anything were Cleveland and Buffalo. And
yeah,
I mean, I think even going to Cleveland um, would have put you in a better position. I think Arizona, out of all those teams, out of Pittsburgh, Cleveland, Buffalo, Tennessee, was a name that was mentioned as well because of the Vrabel
right,
connection.
right,
Green Bay, I don't know if I already said them or not, but all those teams give you a better chance at winning than Arizona does. Arizona would be last in the pack. Um, and just coincidentally, they were first in the money. So that's how it works. Like whenever that report came out, I guess what was it, like 3 or 4 days ago, where they were saying he was getting offers of upwards of like 15, $16 million a year.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I automatically knew. I was like, well, it's definitely not the Colts. And
yeah.
and a part of me was hoping it was Tennessee. I was really hoping Tennessee was going to give him that money.
Man, I don't think he's worth 15 million, but I do
No,
think
absolutely not.
if he can stay healthy, I do think he still has a lot to offer.
I think he's a productive player. I think they would obviously get more production out of him than they did Clowney, but
Oh yeah,
that's
definitely.
I mean, I don't think he pushes the needle. I mean, the last 4 years or the last 2 years especially, his play has really kind of declined. You can kind of see him slowing down, and he's had a very injury riddled career, and I think it's
Mhm.
finally starting to catch up. I mean, look, whenever you get, because I mean, me and him are roughly a few months apart from each other in age, and I know like I'm not playing or like whenever he was 25 and all that, dude, it's a lot different. the, I told Emily. Um, Whenever it snowed last week, it was like -5 degrees and all that shit. And I mean, just I took the trash out and just going out in that cold, like I came back in and I was limping because obviously, like with my knee injury that happened and all that kind of stuff, um, my knee was just killing me. And I mean, that happened every bit of, I guess it'd be 10 years, 11 years ago. And I mean, recovered fully from it. And, when you're in your early 20s, you don't notice stuff like that. Nothing affects. As I'm getting older, man, like even the cold weather, just being out there briefly in it or the rain or something like that, like I'm starting to feel the effects of all that running and stress and all those years of, all the miles I put on my body with soccer and cross country. I mean, that's 17 years worth of sports that I put my body through, and all the way up into my early 20s, and uh, it catches up, man, and it doesn't take quick to get there. Like, it does not take quick, because I thought this was going to be something that I would deal with. It's like, oh, when I hit my like 40s and early 50s, I'll deal with it all then. And dude, it like you hit 30 and like that shit starts creeping in. So I mean, I like all those injuries he has, and even though he competes at such a higher level than like I could ever even dream of competing at, like at his age, like that shit takes its toll. And I think you see that in the last couple years. I mean, his pressures have gone down, his sacks have gone down, tackles for loss has gone down. And obviously he's still a productive and a great enough player that he can have an impact on a game. But I don't want people to get tricked into thinking, you know, you're paying that, at most, say he does have a great career or a great season, not career, and you are paying that $32 million to him the next couple of years. You're not getting that three-time defensive player of the year for that money. You're getting a productive player that can help your defensive line compete to try to win ball games. um,
Right.
so I mean, that's just kind of my viewing on it. It is what it is. What That's just kind of where I stand on it. But I think it's funny, and I guess you can kind of see. I'm sorry, I'm kind of going off on a tangent here, and I'm not letting you talk, and I don't know if you've got some points to make, but it's funny to see how whenever it's a position other than the quarterback position, how the narrative changes, because now it's like, oh well, he's had the second most pressures since 2012, but we ignore the last 2 years. But when it's a guy like Wentz or it's somebody like that who's had one bad year in 5 years, now it's, oh, that dude's washed, oh, he's trash. And I mean, we saw it with Brady. Like, there's people saying like a few years ago, like 2 or 3 years ago, like, oh, like Brady's
We've been
washed. Or
trying to retire Brady for like
yeah,
five
like, and
years.
and it's just so funny that you see a dip of production from the quarterback position, even if it's only a brief dip of production. It might be one season in 5 years a guy doesn't play at an MVP level, and it's like, oh, that dude's trash. Oh, he's washed. But when it's a defensive end or when it's a wide receiver or something, it's oh well, they've had the most pressure or the second most pressure since 2012. Like, dude, that's a while ago, bro. Like, you're
Yeah.
going back. It's funny just the way the national media handles that. Whenever it doesn't come to that quarterback position, how they try to wrap their head around these guys actually being able to produce.
Well, the light shines the brightest on the quarterback position.
Good
So,
and bad. Good and bad.
yeah, exactly. So, that definitely has a part to play in it. And I think a lot of people, myself included to an extent, I agree that I don't think he's the player he used to be. I don't think he's a, three-time defensive player of the year type of guy anymore. Um, I do still think, like, I think the fact that he had like 5 sacks last year is kind of a miracle within itself, considering the fact he was double teamed most often as a defensive end in the league last year. And, teams really didn't have anything else to game plan on the defensive side of the ball other than for JJ. So, JJ Watt, who isn't the prime JJ Watt, still getting 5 sacks while being double teamed more than any defensive end in the league. I do think that shows that he does still have plenty left to give. Um, and while it's not while it's not like he's going to play with the best defense in football, which is what he should have done, um, he is getting a respectable player on the other side that teams have to worry about, and other pieces on defense, at least the teams have to worry about, to where he should be able to make more of an impact, I think, assuming he's able to stay healthy. So it's definitely an improvement in situation because it couldn't have gotten any worse than Houston. But, like we've already said a couple times, I definitely think that um, there were better teams out there, for him. But I mean, who's to tell him that, clearly he made what he thought was the best decision for his career. And I do think he got a nice mix of playing on a better team and also still getting money, which the level of money he got, most guys his age have no business even being offered. So,
Yeah,
I,
definitely.
I mean, player first type of thing, good for him as a player. Um, the fact that he was able to get a contract like that this late in his career, and with all the injuries he's had to deal with, that's definitely definitely a win for him. And it makes, as much as I hate it, man, it makes the NFC West just that much more interesting. And those games where each team has to play each other twice a year are going to be an absolute battle every single time they happen, regardless of what the matchup is. So at least taking away the Rams fan part of it and just focusing on the football fan part of it, it's definitely fun for the league. I am kind of glad, honestly, he didn't go to a team like the Bills or the Packers, and just made things that much more interesting, as opposed to making a favorite even more of a favorite. He just made an interesting team a little bit more interesting. So like, from that aspect, even though I don't think it was the smartest move to make, I like it. I think it keeps things fun. So they definitely still have some stuff they got to figure out in free agency and the draft, on both sides of the ball. But I'm excited. It's just another reason to be excited about the football season, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. And then there's some other things that's kind of come out as far as the Deshaun Watson stuff. Speaking of Houston, and just I want to reiterate, guys in the fantasy league. I said this earlier, but I just want to reiterate how great it is to play in the AFC South, where Houston basically gave JJ Watt, which I know technically they didn't give him, but I mean they kind of did. JJ Watt and DeAndre Hopkins to the Arizona Cardinals for David Johnson and a second round pick. So
And they
well,
paid all of David Johnson's contract.
yeah, like what a world to live in. But speaking of Houston, there was a report I saw today. Speaking of reports, did you see the one about him meeting or talking to the coach? So him and the
Oh,
coach,
Deshaun
yeah,
Watson meeting with
yeah,
Houston's coach, and like
yeah.
him just straight up telling him, "Look, I
Like
don't plan
I'm
on
not
playing for
playing
you
here.
guys." Yeah,
Yeah, like I could see
yeah.
that being like, "Hey,
Uh,
Deshaun, I'm your new coach," and he's just like, "No,
nice,
no, you're
nice
not."
to meet you, Deshaun. I ain't gonna be here.
Yeah,
Your
yeah,
Magic Johnson
no,
meme.
no. And but there was a report that came out today that now Deshaun Watson is willing to pay, I think, what was it, $3 million in fines to sit out the season. Um, and he told them he will not play another snap. So like he's dug in apparently.
Holy,
Yeah,
I
3 million in
see
fines.
that.
That's around what it would cost, I think, for him to sit out the whole season with fines and everything.
Right.
And he said that he'll pay it. So man, what a
Golly,
situation that is, man. That's
man,
crazy.
it's truly that the NFL players, this quarterback specifically, saw the powers that NBA players had. And said, "Man, fuck this! Like, I'm not sitting on anymore," and people are stuff into their own hands, and I'm very pro player on this. We already had this talk about the NBA. Whenever we had like a 2 hour long podcast talked about
Oh yeah.
um, NBA for the last half of it, went on a tangent. I'm the same way with NFL players. I'm full pro player, man. Like I already said earlier in this podcast, you got one shot at a career in the NFL. So you do whatever you have to do to make sure that you can get the best out of it and put yourself in what you believe is the best situation and make the best move for your career. And so I'm all about it, man. Deshaun, dig in,
Yeah,
get
man.
out of that, because
Yeah.
why would anybody want to be at that organization after what they've done over the last couple of years? Like,
No, and I
how
mean,
could you? How can you're talking about this guy's right in the smack dash chance to make a huge mark in the league, and he's supposed to just sit back and play for Houston after what they've done, and like the team that they have failed to put around him. Like,
well,
no,
it's
no
even not so
shot.
much
Get
even
me
the team, I think. Like obviously it is, but
out of here.
I mean, they have no avenues for the near future. They've traded their picks. Their cap space is completely, non-existent. Like they can't sign
Right. Yeah.
people. They can't draft people.
Well, and their assets or lack thereof, in terms of draft picks and all that, that all play, that all goes into what I'm
Yeah,
talking
so I
about. Like,
mean, you're
why
you're
would you
two
want to
you're
be a
at
part
least
of
two
that?
years away from even having assets to be able to improve the team in general.
Right.
And then on top of that, that's if you're convinced your GM is good, which, who knows with Casario, but it's, then you have to hit on those picks. Then you have to let those picks develop. Then you have to make sure your locker room. And on top of that, you got a guy that's supposedly running the inside of that organization who is basically one of these like evangelical new age TV preachers, that it has nothing to do with football. I mean, like the guy has
Right.
nothing to do with football and he's making organizational decisions. And it's just, man, like what a disaster. Like I'm glad they're in the AFC South, man. I'll tell you that. Like I'm glad they played our division. That should hopefully be, which I mean, I know we always play them, or they always play us tough, regardless. But it's
I'd be willing to take a safe bet that if they do trade Deshawn,
it's
probably not gonna be
two
playing y'all that
wins.
tough next
Yeah,
year.
it's 2 wins.
Deshaun
Mark that
Watson,
down.
Deshaun Watson has been a huge reason why they've played y'all tough. So I think you guys would be in good shape. Man, I'm just again taking the Rams fan out of it. As a football fan, I am praying to see Deshaun in either Carolina or Denver. I
San
want to
Francisco.
see. No, see the Rams fan is going to step back in now. Fuck that, man. No shot. The NFC West doesn't need any more. Like we're topped out. No more good players get to come to this division through trades or free agency. It's bound to happen in the draft because there's a lot of good front offices in the division, but no more trades, no more free agency. Like no, the division is topped out, man. I can't do it anymore. I want to see him out there slinging it to Cortland Sutton, Jerry Judy, Noah Fant, Tim Patrick, those guys. Or I want to see,
Wouldn't that
assuming
be an
Carolina
interesting
doesn't have
division?
to, Mahomes and Herbert, and
Because
that
there
would
was
be
talk too about like what was it, like the Russell Wilson thing? What was there, like 3 destinations? It was Las Vegas,
it's Vegas, the
Chicago,
Bears, the
and Dallas.
Cowboys, and there was one more. There was a fourth one.
Was there 4?
There was
Mm,
four.
I know.
It was Vegas, the Bears, the Cowboys, and there was one other one.
I can't
Damn
think.
it, what was it? Oh, I went blank. I know there was four for
Miami?
sure though, but I can't remember what the fourth one was. No, it wasn't Miami. I gotta
Wait,
try
hold
to find
on.
it now.
Let me
But we
yeah,
can
let me look
keep
it up.
talking while I'm looking.
Here, I got it
But
pulled up here. Russell Wilson.
yeah, imagine Deshaun Watson goes to Denver, and then Russell Wilson gets traded to the Raiders. Like,
Yeah, and
could
then
you?
you've got
Now we're talking about the.
the AFC
Oh
West.
my
And then
God.
you've got
Yeah.
Mahomes, Russell Wilson, Deshaun Watson, and then who else is in that division? So you got the Raiders, the Broncos, the Chiefs, and the
And the
Chargers.
Chargers.
You got
Yeah.
Justin Herbert. Yeah, that's
This whole Bleacher Report feed I'm looking at trying to find the article I saw about the landing spots. It's just all JJ Watt right now. I've been
yeah,
scrolling for like 3 minutes and it's still JJ Watt. Um,
yeah. I'm
but
looking
yeah, I
for it
mean,
myself. I can't find it.
it's
Why would you want to go to the like? Why would you complain about your offensive line like being shitty and then list the Bears as one of your destinations?
I mean, it's definitely not an upgrade offensive line wise, but I think the rest of the roster out there in Chicago is better though. So I
Not the
mean,
wide receivers,
um,
especially with Allen
no, certainly not
Robinson.
the wide receivers.
Allen,
It's tough. It's
Saints, the
tough to
Saints,
find.
New Orleans.
Saints. Yep, there
Yeah,
we go. I literally just found it too. Yeah.
that would
Which
be
they would have to
interesting.
do all sorts of cat voodoo to make
Yeah,
that work. But
yeah. Salary cap doesn't
um,
exist.
no, it really doesn't. Like if they wanted to make it work, they could find a way, but they would have to do some serious work though. The most interesting for me because I mean that they're just looking for somebody to step in for Breeze and try to run it back. Their roster is still very playoff ready outside of the quarterback. So if they were able to figure that out, that would definitely make things interesting.
Yeah, they're gonna have
Please
some.
trade
They're
for this
gonna have
guy.
some pretty decent cap casualties this year, though.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what, man. Like that's what puts the Colts in like such a weird position. Um, which I mean, I don't think they're going to be huge free agency spenders, but I do think they might plug a couple holes. But the Colts are one of those rare teams that like not only can give guys the opportunity to compete, but can also give guys money because they have the second most. Well, now after the Wentz trade, they went down to fourth, so they have the fourth most cap space in the league. But that's a roster that's ready to win.
Was it the Jets, the Jags, and somebody else that's ahead of them?
Yeah, I can't remember who all. I can't remember who all was ahead of them, but I know they dropped from number two because they were second right behind the Jets, and then the Carson Wentz trade happened and they took on that salary and they dropped them down to fourth. So it's that's a rare thing, but they got some dudes they're gonna have to pay, for sure. We got Darius Leonard coming up, Quentin Nelson, Braden Smith, Naheem Hines, and like these are all big contributors, and especially Smith, Nelson, and Leonard are guys that are going to get probably top, like for sure, top five money at their position. Quentin Nelson's for sure going to be the highest paid offensive lineman in the league. He's going to be making just, he probably sets a record for offensive line pay, I would imagine.
Yeah, it wouldn't
and
surprise me at all.
and it's 100% worth it. So he's Quentin Nelson is the Aaron Donald of offensive linemen. But then Darius Leonard's going to be making top five money at the linebacker position. Braden Smith's one of the best right tackles in the NFL. He's going to be making top five tackle money, which I think makes it even more apparent why they need to go, offensive line early in the draft and get that left tackle early. So if it is a first rounder, you've got him for 5 years, and because you're going to have Ryan Kelly, who's one of, if not still at the time, I know he was the highest paid center, but I know there's been some deals that have happened, the last couple of years, but I know he is one of the top paid centers. They're going to have the highest paid offensive lineman in general in Nelson. They're going to have top five money going to Braden Smith. Because there were some reports that were saying, like, oh, the Colts should go to try and sign Trent Williams from the 49ers. And like as fun as that would be, I mean, you can't be paying four dudes on your O line that kind of money. That's
right. Yeah.
So yeah, they need a cheap option.
Somebody else is going to have to walk when the time comes, and
right, and all those guys, they need to stay where they're at. So speaking of guys staying where they're at, man, I sent you that text about Ty earlier.
Oh yeah, sounds like that he might not be staying where he's at.
Man, I know.
So
I'm so conflicted on that.
It's yeah. I mean, he's got to be one of them guys too that's just looking for that last contract to see to squeeze what he can out of the rest of his career. And so I mean, if Indy's willing to do that, but it sounds like he's not taking a hometown discount to stay in Indy.
No, he already kind of said he wasn't. He said he was going to look. He was going to look because he said this is more than likely his last contract, because I remember him saying it to the press this last year. He said, I probably have one more contract in me and then I'm retiring. So he kind of basically hinted at however long this contract that he gets is after it ends, whether it's 1 year, 2 year, he's hanging it up. So, but from what I understand, man, I know the Colts want him back. But they're going to let him test the market, and it might be one of those things that, he said, Ballard says, go find your offer, the best offer you can, come back to us, give us a chance to see if we want to match it. And then if not, then, go do your thing. But I love TY. I'm so conflicted on it because I do love him. He's been just a phenomenal guy for our team. Like not only on the field, I mean, his on-field acumen speaks for itself, but as a leader in that locker room and, these young guys, he's basically become the Reggie Wayne, like Reggie Wayne was for TY. He's basically become that guy for our young guys. And it would hurt losing him in the locker room. But I mean, he's had a lot of injuries. He's obviously lost a couple steps, not even one step. He's not as the player that he was 3 or 4 years back. And it's just, age catches up with you, especially, his main thing is, he's not a big guy. He's not a guy that's going to have a huge catch radius or can go up and get it and, all that kind of stuff. He's basically a very savvy route runner who can get the ball and take it, 60 yards. And once you start losing that speed and you become kind of more of a possession type guy, you know, those guys aren't worth that kind of money. And it's the NFL. Like all these guys, they think they're worth a lot more than in their own head than what they're actually might be. And I would love to be able to pay Ty whatever he wants to come back and retire. Like I totally would, but it's just not feasible for the production you've got the last couple years. So who knows? Hopefully it is a friendly deal. It is a team friendly deal, and we do bring him back. Maybe 2 years. 18 million, something like that. I would kind of be okay with. Um, I mean, and even that's kind of like a little rich for me. I think he should kind of firmly be in that 7.5 million range. I would feel comfortable on it, but if he can get more, take it, dude. Like do whatever you got to do, bro. Like I get it.
Yeah.
Um, and then maybe the
It's tough, man.
Colts,
He picked kind of a bad year to be a free agent because the
dude.
the
I
free
know.
agent class for receivers this year is so nice, man.
Yeah,
Which I mean, a lot of these guys could end up getting tagged, and then and then the free agent pool looks a lot different. We still have, I think the team still have like a week to tag people in like the
yeah,
ninth or something like that.
yeah.
So around a week to tag people. So the free agent pool is going to look a lot different. Hopefully by this time next week, whenever we get to sit down to talk to each other again, most of those tags have hit, and then bam, we've got topic number one for next week. But so I mean, it could look a lot different that way, man. But if these guys don't get tagged or don't sign any long-term deals before the free agency period starts on like March 14th or 15th, he's competing with a lot of guys for money
Well,
that, I mean,
even
Chris,
those guys that do get tagged, I mean, and then you got to take into account, some of these guys are going to be cut. Like we've already seen Tyrell Williams and some of these other dudes get cut who,
right?
Tyrell Williams, he tore his labrum. I believe it was, preseason last year. He tore his labrum and he was on IR. But that's a dude that's still really young and really talented that, he was just a cap casualty for the Raiders. They couldn't pay him. And so they just decided to part ways, but it's not like he's coming off a major injury as far as like he didn't tear his ACL or his Achilles or any of that. Like the guy's still got his legs, he's still young, he can still play, he's a big dude. um so I could see the Colts maybe, if Ty is a little too rich, maybe doing like a 1 year prove it deal, kind of like they've done before with some of these other guys. um Maybe 1 year prove it deal, come in, we'll see if you can still play, and then we'll see what happens after that. But I mean, I know you brought up Will Fuller. Like that would be
The one year
cool.
prove thing worked out pretty well for Xavier.
Yeah, well, it did with Pierre Desir. It has for a lot of dudes that have come to Indy. Um, they've been able to, and I think that just speaks to the coaching staff, which I know there's some turnover this year with coaching, but there's still some really talented coaches there. And that just goes to show you how important coaching really is because uh, some of these guys, Xavier Rhodes and Pierre Desir was kind of cooked whenever he came to Indy, and he ended up having really like a really good year. He signed a contract, had another, decent year, not as good as the year before, but and then they cut him, and then he's gone to the Jets. After we cut him, and you haven't really heard the name since. And the same thing with Xavier Rhodes. They were saying, oh, Xavier Rhodes is cooked. He's burnt toast, like on
He
Minnesota.
looked washed his last year in
Yeah, he
Minnesota.
did. And then he comes to Indy and plays at a Pro Bowl level. And it just goes to show you how important coaching really is in these teams. And if you have a strong roster, that you can get the most out of these players. And that's, kind of what I'm hoping for with the Carson Wentz thing is, the guy's had one bad year his entire career. And it's like, oh well, he's washed, and we'll see. We'll see what happens.
You
But
already know that I don't think that that's the case, and I think that the boy is about to come in and have a nice little bounce back season.
shit, I hope so, man. I hope so.
And that's how
I'm
I feel.
excited.
So
I can't believe I'm
let me
actually
ask you
excited
let me
like
ask you
for it.
this. So same contract. Like both players would get the same contract. Would you rather the Colts have T.Y. Hilton or AJ Green?
Oof, oof, that's tough, man. Uh, because my AJ Green fandom goes back so long now. Like AJ Green, the
Yeah,
first
same.
yeah, so the first time AJ Green hit free agency, um, I believe it was right after the Pro Bowl back in 2012, and it was Andrew Luck's rookie year, and him and AJ Green just absolutely just looked another level in that Pro Bowl game. Like they had such a connection, and it was my dream for them to sign him that offseason. Like pair AJ Green with Andrew Luck. This was 2012, 2013. Obviously a long while ago, but the way they looked in that Pro Bowl, I just fell in love with like what that connection could be. And I've always had this dream of AJ Green in a Colts uniform. Uh, so this is a tough one for me because of how long it's been now of me dreaming of that. Uh,
I'm glad I
I
asked it.
I dude, in all honesty, like gun to my head, I would still take Ty. Um, maybe not necessarily. I mean, both guys have kind of dealt with injury. Obviously, AJ Green's injuries has been a little bit worse than Ty's. And Ty has played through a lot of his, where AJ Green, which is understandable. He's like, you're on the Bengals, like you don't have anything to play for. Why? I know that's bad, but I like being honest. Like the Bengals have been eliminated pretty early on, by mid-season, pretty much. So you don't have any reason to come back and put your body through that. Whereas the Colts have consistently kind of pushed for a playoff spot the last few years and even made the playoffs last year. And I know he was dealing with some injuries last year, but he continued to play. But I think the leader that Ty is in the locker room and what he means to this franchise, I think at this point in their career, the talent might be offset by the leadership factor because you have AJ Green come in, and I don't know, enough about AJ Green to know what he is in the locker room or who he is. Whereas I know what Ty is in our locker room, and I know who he is.
I know I've
Uh,
only heard great things about AJ, and you
yeah, I
literally
mean,
like
yeah, like
it's
I'm
hard to
not saying
find a
anything.
bad piece about AJ, but I know what you're saying. Like
Yeah,
Ty
like
already is
because then you have
like
to
he's
come
already
in and
comfortable in that locker
yeah,
room.
like you have to come in and learn your way and
Right.
earn your stripes in the locker room if you're coming into a free agent. And if you listen to Darius Leonard's interviews, he says like all free agents that are going to come here, you're going to have to earn your way through practice. You're going to have to like you're like even with Carson Wentz, like we're all hoping Carson Wentz becomes a leader and refutes some of these reports that have come out magically whenever he has a bad season from Philadelphia media. Imagine that. You
Yeah.
don't hear
Now all of a
anything when
sudden he's
everything's
bad
good.
in the locker room, and he's a
Yeah.
cancer, and
Oh yeah. Yeah.
all this and that.
It
Yeah.
all comes out when you're having a down year, but
Yeah.
you never hear
Yeah.
anything when things are good.
Right.
But I mean, it's uh, Ty that doesn't need to happen. Ty is already a leader there.
Right.
So I think if the contracts are the same, now now that depends on what the contracts are. So like for example, to shoot some numbers at me real
Well,
quick.
I was just basically saying, assuming they were both getting reasonable deals for like 2 years, 8 million a year, or something like
Yeah,
that.
I would honestly like I would take Ty. Maybe not necessarily for the football because I do think AJ Green, his game translates better to what Carson Wentz does as a quarterback, especially with those 50-50 balls. And that's why, like, one of the
He
reasons I'm really,
loved Alshon whenever Alshon was healthy,
yeah,
and that just
but
seems
see,
like
that's another
the
reason why I'm
perfect
really
type of
high on,
match.
yeah, that's another reason why I'm really high on Michael Pittman this year because
Right.
Michael Pittman, 6'4". Obviously, we
Hmm.
saw what he can do with the ball in his hands last year. He's a threat whenever he touches the ball, but he's also excelled in college at going up and high pointing the ball. Big body dude, very similar to a Vincent Jackson or Mike Evans type guy.
That's part of why I think AJ Green would be such a good fit there. Honestly, just because like I think short term AJ Green, I think he still has some left to give, and could be a solid contributor. But long term, like who else is better to come in and mentor Michael Pittman than AJ Green? Like I
Ty,
no, no, not for what Michael Pittman wants to
Ty,
be.
Ty, Ty.
Like I'm sure Ty is an incredible, like for I'm not near as tapped into like the Colts media and things like that, but I've never heard anything bad about Ty either. I've only heard good things about Ty, but
Oh,
just
fantastic
the
guy.
the style of receiver that Michael Pittman, expect it to be. Like if you bring AJ Green in there, man, I just don't think there's anybody better that he could possibly learn from, just from a skill set standpoint.
I
There's
know.
things that AJ could possibly teach Michael Pittman that TY just can't go out there and show him. You know what
So
I'm
there is
saying?
a guy. It's funny we have the Cardinals thing pulled up here because the guy that Michael Pittman says he wants to emulate, and a guy that he watches film on all the time, and coincidentally, it's another number 11. They're both number 11. One of them plays for the Cardinals is Larry Fitzgerald. That's
That's
who
a
Michael
pretty good
Pittman.
guy to want to follow up on. Yeah.
Yeah. So I know. So Michael Pittman has a YouTube channel, and him and his wife Kiana, or fiance, I don't think they're married yet, but they do vlogging and stuff like that. And I was watching
Cool.
his new one he had today. He put out. They're moving into a new apartment in downtown Indianapolis, and he has a jugs machine in his living room, and he says he has his fiance Kiana sit there and put balls, while they're just sitting there in the living room, he'll sit there with a
Right.
jugs machine and catch. And he says,
That's awesome.
yeah. So I mean, like that guy puts in work. Like I'm so excited for Michael Pittman. I think his sky's the limit. But yeah, I don't know if their skill sets are just too similar. Where I don't know if you want two guys that kind of do the same thing
No,
on
so
both
that
boundaries.
I agree. Like looking at it from that point, I agree. Like
You want
I
diversity.
think you can look at that as a reason to not bring him in, but also as a reason to bring him in. And then, through the draft or whatever the case, or maybe like a cheaper free agent, like a Tyrell Williams or a different like big play type
Nelson
of guy.
Aguilar.
Yeah, like address that spot that way, but like AJ Green and AJ Green did show at points that he can work out, even with his size, he can be a nice weapon out of the slot with how good his route running is and how great his hands are. That like I don't think it's out of the question for AJ Green to all of a sudden turn into a possession guy. I really don't,
No,
man. Like
definitely not. He's
you
got
could
great
with
hands too.
his skills, you can stick him in the slot, and now you've got as dependable of an option as it gets in terms of when he's on the field. You put him out there, and so you've got a mentor for Michael Pittman. You can get somebody
Well, you
for the
got
other
Paris
side.
Campbell too there as well.
Right,
So,
exactly. So like I think it makes sense not to do it because they do have Michael
well,
Pittman, but I also think having Michael Pittman, it makes sense if you can get favorable deal, bring him in there, let him teach the young man.
so
I like it.
here's another thing though with AJ Green. Um, so what jersey number does AJ Green wear? His whole career, was he wear?
18, right?
Yeah, you ain't wearing that shit in Indy, bro.
Yeah, it's
you're
true.
gonna you're gonna have
He
to
would
give that up
definitely.
real quick.
Yeah, he would have to change that. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so
Um, but I don't know. Man, I'm so intrigued by the wide receiver position specifically. For like, I can't wait for free agency to pop off so I can start seeing where some of these
I think
pieces
more
go.
than likely, if I'm a betting man, I know I say that all the time. And at this point, if you listen to the show, I gamble. So, but I think it's more likely that Ty walks. Like as bad as that is for me to say, like I hope it doesn't happen, but I think he is going to chase money. Which I mean, do what you got to do, bro. I think Miami is possibly an option I've heard mentioned with him because he is from Florida. Like that's where he's from. Is that area South Florida? And
Ooh, so he
yeah,
could if the Bucks don't re-sign Antonio, he could go ring chase down there in Tampa
he could.
with Tom.
Yeah, and like I said, I've heard Miami mentioned as being interested in Ty. And I think he'd be a great fit down there. I think he'd be a great fit for that wide receiver room and for that team. Give them a great mentor in that locker room. But more than likely, I think Ty does walk. I think he chases money, and I think you're going to see Chris Ballard kind of go with that, you know, quantity over quality, as weird as that is for me to sound. I think you're going to see maybe they double dip in free agency with Tyrell Williams and a Nelson Aguilar. Maybe they get both those guys. And then I think they go draft the dude as well. Because, I mean, and also let's not forget Zach Pascal's there too. And they love Zach Pascal. And Zach Pascal has shown that dude can play. Like
He
that
can
guy,
produce. Yeah,
yeah, like that guy can play. If
he's
you
not
need
like
a
a
big
huge household
catch,
name, but
yeah,
he gets it done.
yeah, like if you need a catch, like for a first down, or you need a play to get into the red zone, that dude will make a play. Like he's not a household name. If you're not familiar with fantasy or the Colts, you and even some fantasy guys, like you might not even know the name. Uh, but that's a dude that works his ass off, and he's 6'1", like he's not a small dude either, and he's fantastic production from the slot. So then you're looking at a wide receiver room possibly of a healthy Paris Campbell, Michael Pittman, Tyrell Williams, Nelson Aguilar, Zach Pascal, and then you add a draft pick to that as well. Um, and
Carson about to eat. Man, I
yeah, I mean,
can't
that's a
wait.
lot of weapons. And then, and maybe you take the money you save on that wide receiver position and you go get because I know the move tight end position in that offense is really crucial because, they've got great blockers in Jack Doyle, who's a great possession guy, but he's not going to stretch the field. Mo Alley Cox is a dude that, he can make plays, but not consistently down the field. But
I think he's a restricted free agent too, right?
yeah, but yeah, they're he'll be back. I don't see any way that dude's walking out the door. Because I think they'll
Trey
match.
Burton,
Yeah,
isn't Trey
Trey
Burton an
Burton's
unrestricted free
unrestricted
agent?
free. Yeah, Trey Burton's unrestricted. Um,
Yeah.
and so I mean, we'll see if Trey Burton comes back, but
So
I mean,
possibly it could be Jack Doyle by himself.
well, possibly. Like I said, I know Chris Ballard has basically said like, well, Zach Pascal's another restricted free agent, and he was asked on uh in a press conference, I believe this was like a few weeks ago, they asked him about, Zach Pascal and Mo coming back because those guys are restricted free agents. And he said, yeah, like we definitely envisioned them being back. So I think unless Mo Alley Cox just goes out and gets a freaking monster contract, and at that point, good for you. But if he just even gets a reasonable contract, they're going to match it. And same thing with Zach Pascal. Like, and, I think as long as he's not getting paid, $10 million a year, like Pascal will be back. So I definitely anticipate both those guys being back in blue. But then, we'll see what happens with, the draft. But I think you can save the money on the wide receiver position, and then maybe you go get a move tight end, maybe a Gerald Everett or maybe a Jonnu Smith, guys that can attack down the field and move with the ball in their hands, get them in space at that tight end position. Because that's a big part of Frank's offense. And obviously, we don't know what's going to happen with Zach Ertz either. Maybe he's cut or traded as well. But, if Zach Ertz is cut, I can definitely see him becoming a Colt as well, with Frank and obviously Carson there. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think they're more likely to do something like that than they are to go out and spend $19 million a year on an Allen Robinson. As much as that would, I would love that. Don't get me wrong. If Allen Robinson becomes a Colt, obviously I'm going to be like super hype because Michael Pittman and Allen Robinson with Paris Campbell, that's just going to eat. But I don't think they're going to spend a ton of money at that position because they do, like we talked about, they've got these contracts coming up starting this year with Darius and Braden for sure. Quentin, you can hold off a year because you got that 5th-year option and you can pay him next off season. But that's something they've got to think about in free agency. And just because the Colts have all this money, like don't sit there and think that they're going to go out and drop. That's why also I thought this JJ Watt report was just like they're not giving that dude, more than 15, $16 million a year. It's just not happening because they're going to be more measured in free agency than I think what even Colts fans are hoping for. You get on Twitter, and of course Twitter we know is like the cesspool of the internet, like Twitter and Reddit. And you see all these reports, and I don't know what it's like with Rams Twitter, but I know with Colts Twitter, we're signing Allen Robinson and Kenny Galladay and Hunter Henry, and we just have all of this money and we're just gonna do all these things. And I think there's gonna be a lot of Colts fans disappointed at that wide receiver position if Ty doesn't return. I think but not for good reason. I think you can get a lot of quality receivers for really decent contracts this year in free agency. And I think that's where Chris Ballard's headed. And then I think on the other side of the ball is where they spend the money. I think pass rusher is kind of where they're gonna put that asset into. Maybe a guy like Romeo Aquara from Detroit, who I really like. That's who I'm kind of hoping we end up with. Or maybe a Carl Lawson, Jerry Hughes, who used to be a Colt before Ryan Grigson was a dumbass and traded him straight up for Kelvin Shepherd. If you even, that's when you know you're a football fan. If you're listening to this and you know who Kelvin Shepherd is, props, props, bro. But I mean, maybe they spend, obviously we got Justin Houston and Danico Autry are free agents, and that I know they want to bring those guys back as well. So I think maybe they bring those guys back, maybe they pay up for that pass rusher, and then your wide receiver position, they take a little hit at, and just kind of fill it in with good players on decent contracts. Because I think Frank is such a good coach that he can get guys open. He can scheme guys open regardless of who you have there.
Right.
So that's just my little tangent on kind of what I think is going to happen. So I'll let you talk for once.
No, the last thing I'm like, we're kind of I think we're approaching that like hour and 10 minute mark. The last thing I wanted to bring it back to the front news of today with the Cardinals, and we've kind of already talked about it a little bit. I want to see if we can find a path for the Cardinals to the playoff. With what we know right now, there a lot's going to change with free agency and the draft, but with what we know right now, let's see if we can find the Cardinals a path to the playoffs, because that's the whole point with this move, I would assume, right? Like you just find a way to get into the playoffs, and then you
And then
never
see what
know.
happens.
Yeah, you never know what's going to happen. So let's see if we can get them into the playoffs. All right. So do you want to assume that there's going to be 6 playoff teams again, or do you think they keep the 17
Oh no,
playoff
they're
with
gonna
the
yeah, they're
expansion?
keeping the 7. Like that's
Okay.
that's a permanent thing.
Oh, it's permanent.
Yeah. That
Oh, I
wasn't
thought that was just something for COVID. That's permanent.
as far as I understand, yeah, like that's how
Oh
it's going
wow!
now.
I mean, I loved it. I like the extra game and stuff, so I'm
Yeah,
here for it.
I'm
Like,
never gonna be disappointed about more
no,
football.
no, give me more football. Okay, so we'll do 7 teams then. All right, so you've got the default NFC East winner. Pick your poison. Washington could be back.
Washington, maybe
If
Dallas.
Dak's back with the Cowboys, then Dallas is going to be in there. So, but I think we would both be in agreement. There's not going to be a wild card team coming from the East, right?
No, I don't see
All right,
that.
so there's one of 7. So the NFC North, you've got the Packers should be the favorite. I think they run it back in that division. Um, the Lions are in full dumpster mode.
Rebuild, yeah.
And so that leaves the Vikings and the Bears. The Bears are a really huge question mark right now because they've got nice pieces on the team, but
They don't have a quarterback.
who knows about the quarterback? I think the Vikings could be a sneaky wild card
Yes,
team.
yeah, I like the
They're
Vikings.
their defense, should be a lot more healthy this year.
Well,
So
yeah,
if
especially
they
getting Danielle Hunter back. I mean,
right,
that's a huge piece for them.
so I think it could be a pretty safe bet to pencil in the Vikings as at least a possible wild card team.
Yeah, I can see them being
Um,
like the 6th or 7th seed.
right. The NFC South is get a little bit tougher because you've got the Bucks look like the clear favorite right now, but then you've got the Saints who've got a nice roster, but they're probably going to have to make some cuts. You've got the Panthers who they're right in the thick of the Deshaun Watson rumors, and if they do land Deshaun,
I think you pencil
you
them in.
vault them into a playoff team. At a minimum, a wild card team, if not a division winner.
Yeah,
Deshaun makes that much of a difference. So, but right now, the only team that you can safely say is going to be a playoff team is the Bucks. As things stand, I think.
yeah.
Um,
Atlanta is always interesting. Like they're almost like the Giants. Like
yeah, they need to
there's no
stay
middle ground
healthy
with
and
there's no
have that
middle ground with
leadership.
them. Like Atlanta, like they're like it's like that Eli Manning scenario where like you win 4 games or you win 10 games. Like there's there's no in between. So
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. So, and I agree. I mean, I find myself wanting to pick Atlanta to be a wild card team. It seems like every year,
they're very
just
talented on
with
the
the pieces
offensive
that they do
end.
have. Yeah, yeah, and they have some nice pieces on. Not as much, but they have some nice pieces on defense too. That just it seems like every year it's just more and more injuries to stack up on them. Um, but
And then
so I
obviously you
mean,
got the
we've
NFC
got the
West.
one NFC. You got the one NFC East winner. So it's like so far we've got one NFC East team one, maybe two NFC North teams, one NFC South team. So like maybe 4 of the 7 playoff teams right now. You've got the de facto winner of the NFC West, where that ends up being, we both said we think the Rams are the favorites as the 5th team, which still leaves 2
2
other
spots.
playoff spots. Yeah, and now you're talking about like, I mean, like, if
As
there
long
are
as
3
Russell
wild
Wilson
card teams,
as long as Russell Wilson is in Seattle, I think you pencil them into at least the wild card spot. Obviously, we'll see what happens to that, but I would pencil them in the wild card as well, just
yeah,
because
if
of
Russ is
Russell
there, I
Wilson.
agree.
So
Yeah,
then you're basically boiling down between what you've got: the Panthers, possibly the Saints,
and
the
the Cardinals,
49ers,
yeah.
and the Cardinals. And depending on who the quarterback is for the Saints, even if it is Jameis, depending on what happens with their roster cuts as well, I still like the talent. I mean, that's just a super talented roster. I would
Hmm.
put them over Arizona. Um, a healthy 49er squad, especially with the draft pick they got. If they move up and get it, Trey Lance or Justin Fields, I think that vaults them over Arizona, if they're healthy. Because I think even with, because this is very similar to, so that defense is very similar kind of to the Colts defense, um, where their defensive line is so good that you can have mediocre cornerback play in that defense and still be successful, because obviously Bosa coming back healthy is a huge thing for them. Uh, but I mean, their linebackers and that defensive front seven, when healthy, is, I'd probably say, top 2 or 3 in football. Uh, and then at that point, you can kind of get away with having mediocre cornerback play. So I would still take a healthy 49ers, depending on what happens at the quarterback situation. I would take the Saints. I mean, as long as they're not, if they're out there trotting out Taysom Hill, then no, I'm not picking the Saints. But if they do end up going with Jameis Winston, then I think I would put the Saints in over the Cardinals. Um,
I would too.
yeah,
I'm a Jameis fan though, so
yeah.
I mean, but I would too. I think the one that I struggle with the most is the Cardinals and the 49ers one. Um, I have a lot of faith in Kyle Shanahan. That's who I wanted the Rams to hire as their head coach the year that we hired Sean McVay. Yeah, I was hoping that they would hire him. I'm extremely satisfied and happy they hired Sean McVay. I
Right.
love Sean McVay. Like, no, I'm not saying this is like I can't believe we don't have Shanahan, but I'm just saying, like, I've been high on Shanahan, so I do think they have the advantage there. And the even with JJ Watt being added to the Cardinals and the missing pieces possibly on the secondary in San Francisco, depending on who they do end up losing in free agency. I think I still like the defense better in San Francisco, but um, I just I don't know. As great as Kyle Shanahan is, I'm about as sour can get on Jimmy Garoppolo. And if they go into the season with him as quarterback, with all these explosive offenses that they're going to be asked to keep up with, as good as their defensive front might be, I think their defense is going to be spending a lot of time on the field. And I think that the secondary is eventually going to be getting exposed. And um, I do like, even though it's Cliff and not Kyle Shanahan, I do like obviously the weapons and the pieces that Arizona has on the offensive side of the ball better. So that, like, but it's tough for me to pick
Well,
one or the
see,
other. Like, that
see,
one's
we
really
disagree
tough.
there, because I think other than quarterback and wide receiver, which, I mean, really you're just looking at DeAndre Hopkins there as making up the difference. Because I think as a total, the I mean, obviously you're taking George Kittle over any Arizona tight end,
Oh yeah, for
uh,
sure.
and then Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk, a couple of those other pieces. Um,
I would
I
rather have
think.
Hopkins and Christian Kirk than Debo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk
Well, yeah, yeah, that's what
next
I'm
year.
saying is, like, I think other than that, but I think as total pass catching weapons, I would rather have Arizona or San Francisco's pass catching weapons as a whole over Arizona.
Yeah, but it also comes down to who's throwing them the ball.
Yeah,
Is
and
kind
then
of
I
my
think,
point.
you know,
Like,
other than the quarterback, I mean, San Francisco's got a better offensive line. They've got a better defensive line. They've got a better linebacking core. The cornerbacks are kind of a wash on both squads. I think they're both not good, depending on who San Francisco brings in. And then obviously we've seen what Shanahan can do with any running back. You know, Jimmy Garoppolo is not going to be asked to carry that offense. They can run the ball extremely effectively, whether it's Jeff Wilson or whoever, and maybe they get a guy in the draft as well. I mean, you know, you don't know. They can turn any running back, and we haven't seen that in Arizona. You know, outside of, you know, a game here or there where their running back looks good, and then they go another 2 or 3 weeks with their running backs being trash.
no, I
So
agree with that. I
so
definitely think that Kyle Shanahan's going to set his running back up for success better. And I agree with all of your points on the defense, but
well, even on the
I'm
offense,
I'm not extremely high on Kyler Murray. Like, I'm not like a huge, ginormous Kyler Murray fan, but like I said, I've kind of soured to the point of sour on Jimmy Garoppolo, to where I do think they have a significant advantage at the quarterback position and at the wide receiver position, not at the tight end position. Definitely. I mean, George Kittle is 1B, you know, to Travis Kelce in the league. So it's tough to have you know, a positional advantage at tight end over San Francisco unless you're Kansas City. But this is kind of basically my point. Was it's really tough to pick between those two teams. Like, I think that's where it comes down to for a playoff spot for
yeah.
Arizona. Basically, is what
If
I'm
San
getting at. Is
Francisco
it's going to come
can,
down to Arizona
if
and San
San Francisco
Francisco.
moves up and gets a quarterback, like I think if they trade and get Justin Fields or Trey Lance, um, then I think they're far and away better than Arizona.
Yeah, I mean, we got to see those guys, you know, get it
Yeah, I
done on
mean,
an
yeah,
NFL
obviously you got to
field.
see them play,
Nothing is.
but both those guys can move, and I think with Shanahan, I mean, obviously we saw what he can do with a quarterback that can move with that first year with RG3. So if you get a guy that can move,
Right.
then you know we'll see. So, but anyway, yeah, I can see Arizona
Essentially,
sneaking
what
in.
we found was what we found basically was, even after signing JJ Watt for 15 million a year, it's still tough to even land them in the playoffs. Essentially, which gets back to our main point from like an hour and 10 minutes ago, that while this makes Arizona better, it's not a needle mover.
No, no, not at all.
Put
So
them into the Super Bowl conversation. You know, they still have a lot of work to do, as do a lot of teams in the league. So
yeah, yeah, the league is always, but I mean, you know how football is, man. You always have that one or two teams that just come out of nowhere and, you know, surprise. You
yep.
never know. So, well, we will end it there. Excited to hit next week. We'll kind of see. Also, shout out to my boy Lanny if you're listening to this. Sorry I had to do it to you this week. Uh, you almost had me. But in the words of the great Vin Diesel, you never had me. You never had your car. Uh, so uh, had me scared, man. I thought I was gonna take that L for the first time. I was like, man, like this fool's really about to give me an L. But we're 10-0. We're moving on. Um, so shout out to him. Also, I'll let Andrew do this part because he's so well at it. Go ahead and take over.
Oh, you would the promo?
Well, I mean, either one. I just figured you were gonna take the YouTube.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Got to hit the promos. Yeah.
yeah,
So,
man. Go ahead and hit it.
we're on Apple. We're on Spotify. You know, all the main places you listen to podcasts. If you're not watching the video version, we're there. So go like or go subscribe or whatever those portions like. And then, of course, if you want to watch our ugly mugs talk football and basketball and baseball, if you want to look at us and, you know, be able to watch us while you listen to us, be sure to go over to the YouTube channel, subscribe to the channel. Whenever you hit the subscribe button and a little bell pops up, make sure you smack that bell so you can get notified whenever we pop up new videos every Tuesday morning. And then if you like this video, if you like what we're talking about today, then another way you can help us out is to like the video. You know, hit
Like
the
it.
like button. That helps us out. Comment on the video and tell us where we're wrong, where we're right. I finally had my first random fan from a different team tell me I don't know shit in the
So hold
YouTube
on.
comments
Was
last
that?
week.
I thought that was somebody you knew.
No, I have no idea who that person was.
Oh, hell yeah.
Yeah, yeah, it was my first like random like you last
Oh,
episode.
that's awesome.
We're supposed to be signing off here, but got to address this. The last episode we did was the NFL mock draft for the first round, our first ever um, on-air mock draft. And after we uploaded it to YouTube, somebody jumped in the comments and said, "Wow, something along." I'm paraphrasing. I don't remember. I'm not going to look it up because I don't
Like,
care
oh,
enough.
you
But
guys are fucking stupid. The
it
Giants
was
would never do
something.
that.
Yeah, it was something along the lines of, "Wow, there's two of you guys, and you both fucked up the Giants pick that bad." And like you had them taking Micah Parsons, the linebacker out of Penn State. I had them taking the edge rusher out of Michigan. Um, and he just thought it was absurd that that we would pick a defensive player to go to the Giants whenever their offense was one of the worst in the league, which they were. But basically what
But
I
their
told him
defense
was,
is bad
look,
too. So I mean,
yeah, I mean their defense was improved last year. Like I think numbers wise, they ended up coming out in the top 10, top 15 defenses. Like it was better than their offense. But basically what I told him was, as long as y'all are trotting Daniel Jones out there, it don't matter how many offensive pieces you draft. Y'all's offense is probably still going to kind of suck because it's just my opinion. It's what I think. I think Daniel Jones is
best player
trash.
available.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think Daniel Jones is trash, and eventually you guys are going to have to rebuild again. And so take the best player that's out there, which for both of us at the time was a defensive player. He just like they didn't have an edge rusher that had more than 4 sacks last year, and he thought it was just asinine that I thought that they should pick an edge rusher. So it was a lot of fun for me. Like I've said in these outros before, if you get on there, if you comment, you will get a response. Like I'm always looking to debate and talk and stuff like that. As soon as I got the notification that that guy said something, it was one of the proudest moments for me. Like it was the first time in my young podcasting career I had somebody reach out to tell me how much shit I didn't know. So
You pissed
we've
off a
been
fan base.
we've been saying for 11 12 episodes now we're amateur experts. We don't know shit about nothing. We're just here to talk. And yeah, I think what happened with this guy truthfully is that he pulled up the podcast, saw like the backdrop that had like the top 12 picks, like that I had typed out, and he just like hit pause and looked like who they got the Giants picking, and then just immediately went into the comments like, you guys don't know shit, because he started talking about Kyle Pitts. And I was like, I mean, if you listened, and you didn't just like hit pause and look at the screen, like I mentioned Kyle Pitts as a good fit for him. But something tells me that you probably just like clicked pause and looked at our backdrop and saw who we had and hopped in the comment section. But hey, that view, that click counts as a view. So, and you commented on the post, which also boosts the post up and stuff. So salute, thank you for the clout.
Yes,
you,
sir.
you know so yeah, do some more of that, please. Jump in here and tell us how dumb we are so I can get in there and talk to you about it.
Well, yeah. Well, that's where we'll end off today. Look forward to hearing from everybody next week. Who knows what kind of big news we'll have? Maybe we'll get a Russell Wilson trade this week,
Hey,
man. Fingers
possible
crossed.
trades, and then it's going to
Franchise
be
tag.
officially franchise
And
tag
this,
time. So
in this episode coming up, this should be, we're basically 2 episodes away from free agency hitting. So
yep.
we've got this episode next week, and then we've got one more episode, and then free agency hits. And free agency, you definitely want to be ready, like, subscribed, notified for whenever all that shit drops, because it's going down in the
Yeah,
podcast
and
world.
I think free agency starts on a Monday, right? Isn't it like Monday the 15th, or
No,
like
it
the
starts the
bargaining window?
17th.
Oh, the
So
17th.
so
Okay.
yeah, it should be, I
So that's
believe,
a Wednesday. So
yeah, I
yeah,
think that
it's right at, so yeah.
Wednesday night at midnight, I think. Well, technically it's Thursday, so technically the new league year
Okay.
starts Thursday morning at midnight.
Okay.
But we all know all these teams kind of negotiate. They have the negotiation period. The 2 days negotiation period before free agency officially hits. So that's why whenever midnight hits Thursday, you just get flooded with like so and so
Yeah.
signing here, so and so signing here, because they've had all this shit worked out already. So we're super excited for that. But with the way everything's been going, man, there's been something breaking happening every week. So just make sure you are
Yeah, right.
listening, you are subscribed. Um, YouTube, Apple, Spotify. Give us some topics too. Let us know some stuff you guys, because we're not just sports, and especially not just football. I know football is obviously what we love to talk about,
It's
but
been dominating the headlines lately,
yeah,
man.
but I mean, like, we're not just sports. I mean, you look behind me here, look at all this bourbon. You want to talk bourbon? Hop on here with me, dude. I'll go all day with you.
Our boy James is dying for us to talk about suburban. He wants to talk about that so he can hop on and join us one
Yeah,
night.
yeah, dude. We'll do a bourbon podcast. We'll get some different bottles in here. Uh, maybe have some friends come over here. Maybe we do like a little Buffalo Trace tasting with some Pappies and Eagle Rare and Blantons and stuff. So some different bottles I've got. I got a bottle of Eagle Rare 17 year just waiting to be popped open for a podcast session. So but yeah, even then, I mean, like, I'm a huge Star Wars fan, man. Like freaking Marvel. Like, you want to talk WandaVision? I've been digging WandaVision. So I'd love to speak on that if you want to hop on here, talk some movies, talk comics, talk nerd shit, bourbon, football, just whatever you guys want to talk about, man. Like, we're not just limited to these things.
Video games, baby.
Yeah. So yeah, give us some suggestions. We really appreciate it. But we're gonna go ahead and end the episode finally now. Appreciate everybody listening. If you've made it this far, like we always say, you're the real MVP. So we will look forward to hearing from you guys and get ready to talk next week. Hope you guys have a wonderful afternoon. Thank you.